This episode's sponsored by Brilliant. Try it with the link in the description.
Hey y'all, I know you're watching at work right now and I appreciate it, so thanks. I'm Trace. As DeLong and Hoppus wrote, late night, come home, work sucks, I know. Remember in the Great Resignation video I made last year, 40% of the global workforce wanted to quit, and a lot of them did.
And yet some stayed. Why?
People are so unhappy, but just aren't unhappy enough that they quit.
Instead, they quiet quit. Oh, spit.
I'm a quiet quitter, but I don't actually feel that bad about it because now I know the science. If you want to quiet quit, you should. I wanted to make a video about the science of quiet quitting. Quiet quitting is taking control over your own work and building a relationship with work that has balance. It could also be called coasting or career cruise control. It's got other names like acting your wage or purposeful professional plateauing. Okay, I made that one up. Or the very common work-life balance. And there's nothing wrong with it. Quiet quitters are working. They're just not exceeding the description of their jobs. I mean, they're not falling behind either. They're just doing their job and going home. In fact, it could be considered healthy.
Here, check this out. I think it'll change how you think of quiet quitting.
See what's happening here? Fred hears that bell. I mean, it's not a bell, but either way, he hears the bell and he leaves. He's not moving rocks after hours. He's not ignoring pebbles while he answers his dino mail from his couch. He leaves and he goes to eat dino ribs. Which is actually confusing because, like, isn't his pet also a dinosaur? So he's eating his pet. Either way, Flintstones was a prime-time television show. It aired in one of TV's most popular, lucrative time slots. How many people saw it and complained about Fred Flintstone promoting a lazy work culture? And of course, quiet quitting applies to employment, but there is a simpler way to think of it with food. Harahachi-bu is an Okinawan idea that you should eat until you're 80% full and then just stop. You're not full, you're not stuffed, you're just 80%. As such, Okinawa has some of the lowest levels of heart disease, cancer, and strokes, but that's not the important thing here. Harahachi-bu is this idea that we should pay attention to our own bodies. So why don't we apply the same idea to our brains? Quiet quitting is saying, I'm not gonna stuff my face, I'm just working until I'm satiated at about 80%. One of the most successful YouTube creators on the planet kind of does this already.
My secret to productivity, I'm not ashamed of it, I'm a little ashamed of it. Here it is. 80%. Everything creative I do my best to get it 80% of the way to as good as I can make it and go no further. I just don't try to get it to 100%.
Hank's baseline is not perfection, but just pretty darn good. And then he moves on. And this is important because no matter how much you love it, work is work. A 2019 pre-pandemic study found that most people were only really productive half the day. After 5 hours, people's productivity tanks. And yet, right now, amidst quiet quitting and the Great Resignation, the United States is still in one of our most productive periods in our entire history. So why are we so concerned with quiet quitting? More on that in a second. The Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks American productivity. From the late 90s to the early 2000s, productivity growth rates were great. It was a boom. Why? Because of a new tool that we could use for work. Yeah, computers and the internet. But since 2005, things have been declining. Not because of quiet quitting, this is totally a normal part of the cycle. I'm no economist, but productivity is measured and increased by a few different things. They've known this for like a century. Land, labor, and capital. More land equals more productivity because you have more space to do stuff. More people equals more productivity because you have more people to work that land or build that stuff. More capital equals more resources to do stuff with people or land or to make better tools to do productivity more efficiently. And today, that's still true. So as I see it, tools are the final frontier here. And we got this throughout history. We get more productive as we create common tools that benefit everyone. Trains, telecommunication, electricity, the invention of business organizations and regulations. Each of these specific inventions changed our economy, creating a productivity spike, followed by a plateau. My therapist calls this upgraded problems. For example, if you invent electric lights, a huge deal. Now you can work machines all day and all night, but that means we're going to need shifts of workers, and we're going to need to think of more about exhaustion and well-being of those workers. People can't work 24 hours a day. They got to sleep, and they got to, go home and take care of their family. That is an upgraded problem. Eventually, the workers band together and force those concerns to be heard. Maybe quiet quitting is part of a new plateau after the invention of 24-hour availability thanks to computer and internet connections. And we talk about this upgraded problem all the time. Burnout. We can't leave the factory because it comes home with us. It pings us at 2 a.m.
The factory isn't a place, it's an idea. So people are reacting to that overreach by stepping back to make themselves happier at work.
And that's not a bad thing. The science is clear. Happy people are productive people. One reason a 4-day work week is so popular is because it makes people happier. And those happier people report better well-being, and according to one test in Japan, 40% better productivity. So quiet quitting isn't a bad thing, it's just renegotiating our relationship with work. And you can use me as an example. I quiet quit and I work for myself.
I have a rubric of money, exposure, growth, and fun. And the reason I have these things is because every job comes with one of them at least. If you're hustling, maybe you're getting a lot of money, maybe you're getting a lot of exposure and growth. You're gonna change over time. I take lots of little jobs in a year, and they can't all pay an exposure. They shouldn't all be just for money. Getting all 4 is great, but that's like a dream job. So you have to balance throughout your career. Quiet quitting is just another way to think about this rubric. You're basically prioritizing different parts of it. You want money and maybe some fun, but you don't really care about the exposure and maybe not the personal growth. Priorities are gonna shift with time, or even promotions. Say a bar back, they're gonna have a completely different rubric than the manager. But even those jobs over time are gonna change how they fit in that rubric. Quiet quitting is just looking at this constant rebalancing of your work and trying to understand what's best for you. So look at your work, apply the rubric, and what are you doing? If everything you do is just exposure and you're making no money and you're having no fun, it's probably time to quiet quit and start reevaluating. You can career coast for 2022 and refocus in 2023. That's okay.
Quiet quitting gives the worker agency over their efforts without judgment regarding their choices. Doing what is required, nothing more and presumably nothing less, is not a bad thing. It's a great thing, especially if it's good for you. Remember in the Great Resignation video I made last year, 40% of the global workforce wanted to quit, and a lot of them did, and they moved to other jobs where they felt happier. Quiet quitting is just the next stage of that same problem. People who are so unhappy, but just aren't unhappy enough that they quit. And this comes back to agency. Elevator door close buttons aren't actually even connected to anything. Most office thermostats don't actually change the temperature. They're used to give you the impression of agency when you have none. It's called a placebo button. Agency is a complicated idea. It's basically the idea of self-determinism. You have some control over your life. The lack of agency, we know, is terrible for people. Lots more studies here, more research is needed. Now, imagine the thermostat on the wall at your office is there, but it has a lock over it. Or the elevator didn't have a door close button at all. That is denial of agency, and I have to say, I'd be ticked off. You want some control, even if it's not real. So if we extrapolate this to work, economist Albert Hirschman wrote a book, Exit, Voice, and Loyalty, which explores consumer behavior in the face of declining qualities of consumer goods. Put simply, if you think the iPhone quality is declining over time, you have the agency to do a couple of things. Exit the consumption of the good, buy something else, or voice your concerns. At work, you can do this too. People who are unhappy with their organization can either quit or speak up about why they're unhappy. If they speak up and nothing happens, or they aren't heard, they have no agency. So maybe they quit. Remember, Great Resignation. But for some, quitting is not an option. It's too risky, too scary, not economically viable. They need these jobs, or it's just too much work to go find a new one. Exit or speak, that wasn't exactly enough. So decades after Hirschman wrote the book, researchers at Cornell added neglect. And neglect is where quiet quitting lives. Speak? No, not gonna be heard. Quit? No, too much work. Rebalance, coast, neglect? Sounds fine to me. So, if this isn't that wild and crazy, the whole quiet quitting thing, then why are people caring about it? Because there is money to be lost if we hate work. We know this because of sociology. In this case, that sociology or science is called the Q12. The Q12 are 12 questions
to assess worker engagement. They ask these 12 questions to thousands or tens of thousands of employees all the time. Gallup uses these answers to understand where the employees are on a scale from 5 to 1, actively engaged to actively disengaged. An actively engaged employee is happy to be there, they're excited to do their job.
An actively disengaged employee is resentful that their needs aren't met, and they're acting out of their unhappiness. Economists estimate that disengaged employees cost the global economy $7.8 trillion. This is why people care about QQ, because people aren't happy, which costs money. Big tech companies like Apple, Google, and Twitter have flexible hours and free food and entertainment. They let you do laundry on site sometimes. They're literally fulfilling Maslow's hierarchy of needs at work. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. 60% of workers are emotionally detached at work, and 19%, 1 in 5, are miserable at work, which is the same as being actively disengaged. That's a problem. And you can't disconnect these two things, the Q12 and the pandemic, from each other. So many of us are at home, and employers are terrible at making us feel heard, making us feel understood. We don't get perks. We aren't part of a community. And one of the Q12, do you have a best friend at work? Yeah, my cat. Or this person that I chat to over Slack. Now we're rebalancing. We're making ourselves more happy. And in part, that means pulling back from work, which you would do in any relationship that hurts you and is unbalanced. Of course, now, thanks to TikTok trends, this is called quiet quitting. So work sucks, I know, and you're dealing with this by reevaluating your relationship. And you know, by the way, what doesn't help this? Shaming people.
I have the best advice for women in business. Get your fucking ass up and work.
That's not great. The Q12 has science there too. 70% of the problems at work are due to management. Bad management equals unhappy employees. Very few people are quiet quitting because they hate the tasks that they're doing at work, but the environment, the opportunities, the growth, the exposure. Miss KK saying no one wants to work isn't just unhelpful, it's deflection. No one wants to work for you. 95% of people who are thriving at work report being treated with respect all day. They're engaged, they know their mission, they feel included and listened to, and they have friends at work. Heck, 87% of them report smiling and laughing a lot. And I've worked in places like this, and maybe you have too. We used to long for the days when we had it. We recognized when work used to be better. And you know what changed? Management. The people were all the same and we were doing the same thing, but we didn't feel listened to or respected anymore. You're not gonna quit. That's just more work on you, but if you stick it out, you can find other ways to be happy. Now, before we wrap, let's look at this in practice. Imagine you're a teacher. You work during school hours, you're teaching kids, you're doing great, but you don't take on the cheerleading coach job or teach driver's ed. You don't plan the pep rally. Your instinct might be, think of the kids. Who coaches the cheerleaders? Who does the pep rally? And the answer is right in front of you. Those are other people's jobs. If you want it done, you can volunteer to help. Join the booster club. But the teacher, if they want to quiet quit on this, that's good for them because they'll be a better teacher if they do that. Now, imagine you're Hugh Jackman. It's Deadpool 3, you're working during business hours, you're hitting your mark, you're acting good, think, you know, you're doing great, but you're not planning that marketing push. You're not pitching new ideas to the director. You don't plan Jenny the intern's birthday party. You don't set up the lights. Your instinct might be that Hugh, he's too busy for that. He's one of the leads, right? Is he quiet quitting though? He's walking at the bell, he's doing his job, and he's not doing more, and he's not doing less. That's quiet quitting. We don't see these two jobs as equivalent, in part because we value teaching jobs differently because they're prominently done by women, so a patriarchal society tends to see them as lesser. That's for another video though. Both of these ideas represent a healthy relationship with work, and we just expect it more with some jobs more than others. Both of these workers will be happier, and their classroom/movie show will be so much better for it. And the point is, they'll have the agency and voice to make their own decisions. We shouldn't assume quiet quitting is bad, because it's not. Maybe Hugh Jackman has a baby at home that he wants to be there for. Maybe that teacher volunteers to help the less fortunate after work. Or maybe some Gen Zer has a small business on the side. Or maybe that human just needs a break. All of these things are totally valid reasons to quiet quit. We tend to immediately say that quiet quitters are lazy, and it's not lazy. It's work-life balance, which is healthy. All of this just gives people agency over their choices, and the science says that people with agency are more productive, which is good for the economy, are happier, which is good for everyone, and are healthier. But speaking of agency, I hated learning math growing up. It's not that I hated math, I hated how it was taught. And my teachers didn't seem keen on helping me understand it the way I needed to, as much as they wanted me to memorize times tables, show my work, and know how to hit the buttons on the calculator. I wanted to be an engineer, but I couldn't make calculus work in my brain. Personally, I need to understand the why of something in order for it to really stick in there, which is why I use Brilliant when I want to learn complex math these days. On Brilliant, you can learn things like calculus or algebra, but you can also learn scientific thinking, computer science and engineering, orbital mechanics, and a ton of other topics. But they let you play with the problems to get why they work. And that is why I really like it. The first 200 to use my link here will get 20% off the annual premium subscription. If this sounds like something you'd benefit from, use my link and try it. In my school, there were right answers and wrong answers. And if I didn't understand why I needed to use, say, a derivative to solve a calculus equation, I only learned to hit the button on my calculator. Now I know that velocity is a derivative of position with respect to time, and I know it sounds simple, but in high school, it just wasn't how we were taught. Brilliant makes me feel like I know what I'm doing, even when often I don't. Again, if this sounds like something you'd benefit from, use my link and try it. You get 20% off the annual premium subscription. Best case, you'll find a new appreciation in learning. Worst case, you'll have some fun trying it out anyway. Thanks for supporting the show. Thanks for helping me keep this channel going. But speaking of, let's wrap things up over here.
So what did we learn? Quiet quitting is a normal part of work. And the way to fix it isn't to shame them, but to listen to those quiet quitters and learn what they need and respond to that. So simple, and yet we're still not doing it. That's how you turn employees into engaged workers. That's how you limit people quiet quitting, and we have to do it on such a massive scale that it is quite intimidating. Luckily, I'm just a science YouTuber, so I don't have to do it, but it's a big deal. For me, I entered the workforce in the midst of one of the biggest economic slumps in American history. Personally, I have a degree, I have multiple degrees, but for a while I lived in my grandmother's basement. I was slinging salad and breadsticks at Olive Garden for 2 years while trying to find work, and like many millennials, we ultimately took on more student debt. We didn't make as much money or progress in our work at a time in your life when Americans, including Gen Z who are doing this now, are in some of their peak productive years. Many millennials will never recover from this, and maybe because of that, they'll coast for a while. We've all been there. That quiet quitting is a coping mechanism. But once people start respecting you at work, once they listen to you, these people will come out of their shells, just like I did. I came out of my shell, and I helped build everything I could. I worked on anything I could get my hands on. I was so happy and excited to be there. My mom always said, make yourself indispensable, and I didn't know how to do that until I felt heard, respected, and understood at work. Creating that rubric was a way of me kind of saying, you're doing too much stuff, you need to rein it in and find what makes you happy. Combining that with the idea of hara hachibu and only working to about 80% really helped me balance my life, my work, and fight my perfectionism in a way that did make me indispensable. Maybe you can do that too. Maybe you should. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you learned something today. Also, if you're watching this at work, congratulations. I hope you're balancing your work and life in whatever way is best for you. Tell me what you'd rather be doing down in the comments, because maybe someone will see it and offer you a job. You never know. Share this with your friends. Please consider subscribing to keep on learning. I'm Trace, and I'll see you all in the future.